Now, I cannot, in good conscience, say I'm fond of the Alien franchise because how can I be a fan of any series in which only the first two installments are great and everything else ranges from pretentiously mediocre to complete and utter just trash? And not to mention the fact that the best ones came out decades ago, so. Now, I would say this film is, in a way, the black sheep of the franchise, but since basically everything that was released after Aliens is, so at this point, we're all just going to see what nonsense they're going to do in the next film, so hey. Now, I do applaud Ridley Scott for his ambitious attempts to not make a bland prequel to Alien and just play it safe. Like, he could have made a film called Alien Origins or Aliens The Beginning or something equally stupid as that. And given the information of this film, I mean, it could have been about the engineer homeworld and how they create xenomorphs as weapons, but then they break out and overthrow the planet and eventually turn it into the xenomorph homeworld, like they terraform it, and it ends with one of the engineers escaping in a ship, but a queen facehugger sneaks aboard and attacks and impregnates him with the queen xenomorph, and during the chaos, the ship crashes on LV-426, and before the engineer dies, he sends a transmission warning to stay away, but the queen bursts out of his chest and lays her eggs all over the ship, setting up the events of Alien perfectly without really retconning anything. Wait a minute. That sounds way more interesting than what we got instead. But no, Ridley Scott wanted a film set in the same universe but wanted it to explore its own mythologies and idea. And like I said before, I will commend him for his ambitious attempts. But at the same time, I do condemn him and the studio for making a very uneven film, and especially for them pulling a Hobbit by stretching the story of the origin of the xenomorphs into 3 films, especially since you could just do it in one. As stated before, Ridley Scott wanted to tell a very different story that explored its own ideas. But that was all kind of impossible when it's always going to be under the iron boot of the Alien franchise, and the expectations of this prequel setting up the events of Alien didn't help either. So either A, you just say, screw everyone and tell your own story and be your own thing, or B, just give in and give the people what they want. Alright, just make a prequel to Alien. Now this film manages to do both, yet also do neither at the same time, which leads to a very uneven film. Not to say the film is devoid of greatness, since there are a lot of things in it that deserve much praise. Like, the film looks beautiful and has a lot of impressive looking landscape shots. I love the opening of the film and how it implies this is how the engineers create life. And I love the overall design of the engineers, as well as just visually they look like a race worthy enough to create the iconic xenomorphs. There are a lot of great performances in here, with the standouts being Michael Fassbender as David. Idris Elba is also great and adds a lot of personality to the crew of the ship. I thought Noomi Rapace as Shaw was a good protagonist, and she helps sell a lot of the intense moments her character goes through, like the scene where she has to get that alien tentacle trilobite creature out of her stomach. The whole time I was on edge. She and Logan Marshall Green have a good on-screen chemistry as a couple, and I was a little upset to see his character die. Like I said, there's a lot to love and praise about this film, but its biggest flaw is the script. Like, it wants to be deep and philosophical, and every so often it does succeed, such as the scene between David and Holloway, but there's so many moments where the writing in here is just incomprehensibly stupid, which borders on a parody at times. The scene involving Fifield and Milburn is the best example of this. The fact that the geologist, of all people, getting lost is bad enough, but when Milburn starts treating that hemorrhapede worm alien thing like it's a goddamn puppy, you kind of disconnect from the film in a way, and don't feel sympathy at all when he gets eaten by it. Like, this is the kind of stuff done in parodies, like I said. And it gets insulting to a certain point how baffling the writing gets in this. And the sad part is that a lot of the biggest problems in this film could easily be fixed. Like, for one, you can just get rid of those 2 characters I mentioned earlier by just having Holloway be a geologist as well as map out the tunnels. And they really have no impact on the plot overall. The hemorrhapede snake thing that kills Milburn is never seen again, so what's the point? And the mutated Fifield just kills a bunch of nameless extras when he rampages through the ship's hangar, and nothing else really comes of that. You could just cut/write them out of the entire film, and it would be all the less stupid. Alright, now I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but we still need to talk about the whole Prometheus school of running away from things. It's become one of the most infamous moments in modern film. Now, look, I've heard some people defend this by saying, well, in the heat of the moment, you just wouldn't think right and act purely on instinct and just run away from the danger. While that is somewhat understandable, it still just looks really silly when you watch it on the big screen. It could have been easily fixed by just having them run left or right, and you just have Vickers not make it in time, and nobody would have complained, trust me. And though I wouldn't call this film pretentious by any means, because it does handle some of its themes very well, like the whole theme of disappointment, which is rather ironic given the reception of the film, but for the most part, it's really just kind of full of itself at times. Like, it makes sense why all these themes would be here, since after all it does deal with the origins of humanity, but it does go a little overboard at times. Like, we don't have to see a freaking image of a xenomorph on a wall and like a cross pose. Like, really, come on. And speaking of which, I hear at one point Ridley Scott suggested that one of the engineers went to Earth a long time ago, and it's strongly implied that that was Jesus Christ and it got crucified. Like really? Look, your film isn't smart enough or deep enough to pull that kind of thing off. If you want to have a deep film, you can't have all these goofy moments in which characters are being stupidly irrational. And also, I don't think it was appropriate to title this movie Prometheus. I understand it's the name of the ship and the Greek myth, but there are a number of problems with this. Like, for one, in Greek mythology, Prometheus was punished by the gods for giving fire to humanity. He had nothing to do with their creation. Second of all, the whole point of this journey is to discover the origins of humanity, not to give fire some other advanced technology to the rest of humanity. And third of all, the whole crew is punished before they could tell the rest of humanity, so it's not even a good like comparison to the story. It should have been called like Genesis or something like that. And also, the last act of the film gets pretty silly and ridiculous at times. Disregarding the whole Prometheus school of running away from things, as mentioned earlier, it has a lot of other stupid moments. Like, we're supposed to believe this one engineer ship can go to Earth and wipe out all of humanity. We would just blow the thing out of the sky. And they do that by just crashing the Prometheus ship into it. It's kind of a problem in stories that are set in like isolated environments or locations in which you have like a powerful entity escaping, and the goal of the film is to prevent it from reaching the rest of the population before it can supposedly wipe it out, even though it's defeated by a small group of people in the end. It's like how in the movie Life, yeah, remember that movie? We're supposed to think that this little white squid creature thing can wipe out all life on Earth. No! We would just nuke that thing out of existence. If it can be defeated by a nuke, it is not a threat, alright? It also isn't how the last conflict with the engineer just boils down to the typical alien creature chasing a human through a derelict ship. And the ending of this makes little logical sense. Like, I get why Shaw and David would want to go to the engineer homeworld, but they're so ill prepared for it. They just lost everyone, like their whole crew, the whole ship, and now they decide to go to this planet full of aliens that are most likely hostile towards them, since like the engineer wanted to go to Earth to destroy humanity. Like it just doesn't make any sense. They should have at least used the ship to travel back to Earth and then get ready to go to the engineer homeworld. Humanity also could have reverse engineered the ship and heavily benefited from its technology as well, so. And last, it's a huge pet peeve of mine. Anytime in movies or whatever, when you have like an end credit scene or something that sets up something that is completely ignored in the next installment, and what I'm referring to is the Deacon alien bursting out of the dead engineer at the end. What is this supposed to mean? It doesn't show up in Alien Covenant, and I highly doubt it'll show up in its sequel. And this does not take place on LV-426, so it couldn't mutate in like a queen xenomorph and lay eggs around the destroyed engineer ship. And what is it supposed to do anyway? It's just stuck on some planet in the middle of nowhere. The only thing I could find about what happens to this creature is that it mutates into a mountain. God, that's so stupid. In some tie-in comic or whatever. God. Look, I know I've been railing on this film very hard, and it does deserve a lot of the negativity it's received. And while I still do applaud it, for its ambitious attempts, I still can't give it credit for its missed opportunities. They needed a tighter and more coherent story, whether that be its own thing or just a straightforward prequel to Alien, with all the plot holes filled up. It's almost a bit of a shame, too. It really could have been something really provocative and fantastic, but it's unfortunately muddled with all these silly and stupid moments that just hold it back from being a true masterpiece.